Buying a home is one of the most exciting milestones in life, but it's also a big decision that requires the right knowledge to navigate successfully. In today's episode, we're discussing the costs you need to plan for when purchasing a home so you can make confident, informed decisions every step of the way. Don't forget to like and subscribe to keep that helpful content coming. Hey, Lindsay, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Joe?
I'm good. So we're talking about the costs involved when buying a home.
Beyond the purchase.
Beyond the purchase. So
Yes.
not just the closing costs and down payment.
That's all the stuff that leads up to it. What
Okay.
we're talking about today is all of the stuff that comes up and most first-time home buyers will overlook.
Okay.
So that actually brings me to my first question. What hidden costs of buying a home are typically overlooked?
Well, okay. So, obviously you have down payment. People like to save for the down payment,
Sure.
right? And that's, we know that. Closing costs. Every house, if you have a mortgage, there's going to be closing costs. Now, some people say, well, I don't have closing costs. The builder's paying or the seller's paying it or the lender's paying it. But,
There's always something.
for those of you who don't know, if there's no free lunch, if someone's paying, if someone's paying for something, you're going to end up paying in some way. Maybe it's a higher interest rate, or maybe it's a higher purchase price or something like that. But we're not talking about those things. Okay. So we're talking about the other things, right? So like there's things that happen before the purchase that people might not be aware of, right? There's home inspections.
Yeah.
And so home inspections can be anywhere from $375 to thousands of dollars, depending on how specific you go.
Right.
I know like the typical home inspection, I don't know, how much is it now? Like $500?
Yeah, I think depending on where you go, but pretty average around 500.
500. Okay. So I do know that, you're going to get a licensed home inspector and they're going to do a 4-point inspection typically. And they do other, they might do a wind mitigation report to see, for your insurance purposes. And they do some other things, but they're $500 and you can go up to thousands of dollars if you get a contractor to do it and bring in all the subs.
Yeah.
So if you're buying a $300,000 home, maybe you don't spend thousands, but if you're buying a $1 million or $2 or $3 million home, you might want to look at maybe a different level of home inspection.
Sure.
Other things that might be involved that get overlooked, is that appraisal or inspection, right?
Yep.
So whether, most lenders are either going to collect up front or they're going to collect at closing for the appraisal. But if that house doesn't close, whose responsibility is it to pay that appraisal?
Right.
And a lot of people, borrowers say, well, why should I pay it? I'm not buying the house. Yeah, but you were going to buy the house and you incurred a cost.
Right. The work was done regardless.
The work was done.
Yeah.
And should the lender pay for that, or should the realtor pay for it? It's your responsibility. So that's another, cost that people don't always consider. Other things, a lot of these costs come after the purchase, right?
Yeah.
And these things that you got to budget for. So things like, maintenance. Got a budget for maintenance, painting, regular maintenance, like maybe you need a roof every certain amount of years or ACs go out. Hot water heaters, they just bust, right? So a lot of other costs.
Yeah. Well, can you break down how closing costs work and how much I should expect to pay if I'm going to purchase a house?
All right. So closing costs, there's a lot of costs in closing costs that are fixed. So it doesn't matter if you're buying a $300,000 house, a $400,000 or $700,000 house. There's costs that are involved.
Flat fee.
There's some flat fees in there, right? And then there's some that are variable to the loan amount. So, people say as a rule of thumb, it's about 2 to 3%. Well, I'd say it's more like 2 to 5%. Okay.
Gotcha.
If you're buying a $200,000 house, a lot of those fixed costs, they amount to more of a percentage of the purchase price. And so if you're buying $1 million house, that might only be 2% total. But if you're buying a $200,000 house, it might be more like 4 or 5%.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of in the closing costs, you have lender fees, right? Some lenders, they charge different things. They call them different things. They put them different places, but there's lender fees. Outside of lender fees, everything else to the lender is a third party. So you have title costs, depending on which state and which area you're in. You have title fees. You could have, there's governmental taxes. Now, again, depending on which state you're in, and depending on the taxes. In Florida's, we in Florida, there's no state income tax, but they get revenue from taxing on purchasing properties and things like that. So there's governmental costs, title, prepaids and escrows. So you're going to prepay a certain amount of your taxes and insurance up front. You're going to pay a full year of insurance. And taxes are a little more lenient because the government, they can put liens on your properties and things. So they'll let you pay at the end of the year.
Yeah.
But insurance, they want their money up front for the year. Taxes paid in arrears. So when you get, depending on where you are, depending on when taxes are paid, typically in Florida, they're paid in November.
Yeah.
But those costs are part of your closing costs. So altogether, depending on your purchase price, the higher the purchase price, the lower the percent, but typically 2 to 5% with that in mind.
Awesome. Good info. So those are all kind of like fixed costs from what we discussed so far. What ongoing expenses should I plan for after I've purchased a home?
Well, maintenance is the main one, right?
Okay.
You have taxes. Okay, so taxes are, depending on where you live, again, I shouldn't have to keep saying that, but depending on where you live, your taxes could be reassessed every year. Some places it's every 5 years. And, depending on homesteading in Florida, you can homestead your property so it only goes up no more than 3% a year. I think it's 3%. And in some areas, they don't have that in other states. It'll save you a
ton of money, too.
It'll save you a ton of money. So if you're not homesteaded, make sure you do that in the state of Florida.
March deadline.
Yeah, March deadline or February 28th, depending on if it's a leap year or not, right? And so there's taxes. There's insurance.
Yeah.
So usually these are escrowed into your payment. But insurance is going to go up on a regular basis as well. Now, outside of those two things, you have you could have a lot of maintenance, not a lot, but you have maintenance costs, depending on the age of the home and the construction.
Sure.
But your roof will eventually go bad. It's pretty much inevitable, right? Doesn't matter what kind of roof you have, for the most part, you're going to have to replace that.
Right.
Your air conditioning does not last forever. Your heating systems, plumbing even does not last forever. Electrical is going to have issues. So these are some of the ongoing costs. That's inside the home.
Yeah.
Some people don't think about the maintenance outside the home. Lawn care, sprinkler care, if you plants, mulch being replaced.
A pool, if you're in Florida.
The pool could cost you $100 a month, $200 a month, depending on how often you run the pump. Do you have it professionally maintained, or are you going to maintain it?
Yeah.
So these are other costs. Can you think of any I'm missing?
And the biggest one for me was the pool.
The pool, okay. That caught you off guard?
Yeah. Maybe some personal experience attached to that one.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I was the pool boy for a while.
Yeah.
I was very expensive and not very good.
Are you a big fan of outsourcing now?
I am. Our pool help is like $100 a month.
Yeah.
And, if you can save that money, great. But the chemicals I would put in would be $20 or $30 a month.
Yeah.
And then the maintenance of it, doing it once a week, it's a lot to maintain.
Yeah. I think sometimes just having that time back too.
The time is valuable. Time is money.
Yes.
So those are some of the other fees, and you think about maintenance, people don't think my roof's going to go bad, but it will, right? If you have a 10-year-old roof, you might only have 10 years left, depending on the roof, depending on where you live, the construction, whether it's a shingle, a tile, a metal roof.
Or just one good hurricane season could come through.
Let's not talk about that.
Knock on wood, quick.
Or a hailstorm.
Yeah.
That's what got my roof. Hail, which was crazy. But roofs can be anywhere from $15,000 to $100,000 on some tile roofs and some houses. So it could be a real expense. What I suggest is look at a maintenance schedule on your house and budget. Put some money away every single month to put into emergency maintenance fund because it will happen.
Well, that actually kind of answers one of my next questions, which was what strategies do you recommend for budgeting these additional costs alongside the mortgage?
Right. So, they say 1% a year. So if your house is $100,000, that's $1,000 a year. If it's $300,000, that's $3,000 a year.
Yeah.
But you have to look at what is the age of my house? The older your house is, the more you're going to have to budget. The older your systems that are in your house, your AC, your plumbing, your electrical, and your roof. Those are the 4 ones, right?
Those are the big ones.
Yeah. So those are the 4 major systems in your house. And if they're older, you're going to have to budget more and catch up.
Right.
But if you just moved into a brand new house, good for you. But for the rest of us, we're going to have to put some money away every single month or every single year to plan for those expenses, because the worst thing would be if your AC went out and you live in Florida and it's summertime.
August.
You don't want to have to think about how am I going to pay for that.
Right.
So budgeting would be my best. And I would say 1% a year based on the home's value to save for if your systems are in good working order right now.
Awesome. Well, that's all I had for you.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us today. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, put them down below. As always, this is not financial advice, is it?
It's not financial advice.
No, these are just some suggestions and some tips for you. If you're not a subscriber, like, subscribe, share, do all those things, and we'll see you next time.